Welcome to the deep dive. So today we're asking something I think a lot of us wonder about. Why is there this constant, huge focus on billionaire founders, these startup unicorns,
Mhm.
and this message that, anyone can hit that level of success just through hard work when, frankly, what we see around us feels, well, pretty different?
Exactly. And that's what we want to get into in this deep dive. We're trying to unpack the forces behind that whole narrative.
Okay.
The psychology, the way info travels online now, the algorithms, and really the incentives. Who gains from keeping this myth of easy overnight success going?
Right.
We've looked at some really interesting stuff that explains why these stories grab us so much and, yeah, who's benefiting.
Okay, let's jump in then. What is it about the success story itself? Why does it pull us in so strongly?
Well, it's fascinating. Humans are just fundamentally drawn to stories.
Yeah.
Much more than raw data or complex explanations.
Right.
And that classic hero's journey structure,
Mhm.
the underdog fighting the odds, that gives us this real emotional kick. It offers hope, right?
Yeah.
And this comforting idea that maybe we have more control over our own fate. We love a David and Goliath story, always have.
That totally makes sense. That feeling of possibility, it's incredibly appealing. But I guess when we only focus on those wins, we're missing something big, aren't we?
Oh, absolutely. Think about it like this. Every big success story is like a lighthouse beam in the dark.
Okay.
Survivorship bias means we just stare at that bright light.
Right.
And we completely ignore all the ships that, crash on the rocks, didn't make it.
Wow,
We
yeah.
only see the winners. And we try to learn from them, but maybe those aren't even the right lessons because we ignore the huge number who tried the same things and failed. Their stories might actually teach us more.
That's a really strong visual. We're drawn to the light, blind to the wrecks. And then there's this other thing where we tend to look for proof for what we already want to believe.
Yes. And that brings up confirmation bias. It's just how our brains work. We actively seek out information that confirms what we already think or hope is true.
So like the college dropout myth.
Exactly. If you want to believe dropping out leads to being the next Steve Jobs, you'll focus on those few famous examples.
Uh-huh.
And you'll conveniently ignore the thousands, probably millions, who dropped out and it didn't lead to a billion-dollar company. You see what you want to see.
Okay, so psychologically, we're kind of set up to love these inspiring, odds-defying tales, and we filter out the stuff that doesn't fit.
Got it. But how does, the modern world amplify all this?
Yeah, this is where let's call it the myth machine really gets going. Media, social media algorithms, they all play a part.
Right.
Traditional media, well, they often go for the dramatic success stories because, let's be honest, they get more attention, more clicks, more views.
It's click gold, basically.
Totally. The rags to riches founder story, that's way more compelling than a detailed analysis of market trends.
And it's true, you almost never see big stories about the, 95% of startups that just fizzle out. That's not news, apparently. Nope. And then social media just puts that on steroids. The platforms themselves are built to promote stuff that's symbol, looks good, and spreads fast.
Viral content.
Exactly. So you see a post, made $1 in 6 months, no experience.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to fly.
Right.
Compare that to, say, worked my butt off for 7 years, finally broke even. Which one gets shared?
Yeah, no contest. The first one offers this instant dream. The second is just reality. Kind of boring online.
It feels like the algorithms themselves are sort of incentivized to push the sensational, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Over the nuanced truth.
Definitely.
And then there's this thing called the illusory truth effect. Basically, the more times we hear something, the more likely we are to believe it's true, even if it's not.
Oh, okay. Repetition makes it real.
Pretty much. So when you're constantly hit with these overnight success stories everywhere, news, social media, ads, your brain just starts to accept it as normal, even if it's actually super rare.
So it's not just that we like the story initially, it's the constant echo chamber effect, making us think it's the standard path. Like we're seeing only the highlight reel of outliers, which, okay, makes me wonder, apart from just being entertaining, who is actually benefiting from these myths being so dominant?
That's a great question. If you look at the incentives, it becomes pretty clear who gains. Startup founders, for one.
How so?
Well, if you can tell a really compelling story about your vision, your journey, how you're going to change the world, you're way more likely to attract venture capital.
Okay. The story unlocks the money.
Investors are drawn to that confidence, that seemingly clear path to huge returns. The narrative itself becomes a major asset. It's part of the pitch.
That's critical. It's not just fluff, it's functional. And it's not just the founders trying to get funded, is it?
Oh, not at all. Think about influencers, coaches, gurus. People who build a whole brand around their supposed success secrets.
Right, the buy my course crowd.
Yeah. A polished story of rapid success gets them brand deals, speaking gigs, sells their products, and even big institutions do it.
Like universities.
Sure, universities, even governments sometimes. They'll highlight their star alumni or successful entrepreneurs to boost their own image, attract talent, get funding. They curate the success stories that make them look good.
So maybe they're not always like lying intentionally, but there's definitely a strong push to present a certain version of the story.
Exactly. A polished version.
Leaving out the messy bits.
Right. Yeah. Omitting the struggles, maybe downplaying how much luck or privilege was involved or how many other people helped along the way. And like we said, the audience often just eats it up because it's appealing. We want that simple roadmap. It feeds itself.
It really is a feedback loop, isn't it? The nice story gets told, the teller benefits, the audience accepts it. But what's the downside? What are the actual costs of promoting these myths so widely? What are we missing?
Well, the costs can be pretty significant, actually. One big one is creating totally unrealistic expectations, especially for young people or anyone starting something new. If all you hear are stories of instant success, then the normal, slow, often frustrating reality of building something that can feel like your failure.
I see. It leads to burnout or just giving up too soon?
It can, yeah. Leads to discouragement. Why isn't it happening for me like it did for them? That gap between the myth and the reality can be really demoralizing.
That makes a ton of sense. If the story is all about speed, then hitting normal roadblocks feels like you're doing something wrong.
And second, this laser focus on the individual success story, the outlier, it can actually make inequality worse in a way.
How so?
Because by celebrating these rare exceptions, we often avoid talking about the bigger picture. Systemic things like wealth gaps, bias, unequal access to education or funding, all the stuff that really shapes who gets a fair shot.
It's like focusing on the individual lets us off the hook for fixing the system.
Kind of, yeah. It pushes this idea that it's all down to individual grit and ignores the context. And we've also seen some pretty spectacular implosions, haven't we, where these amazing success stories turn out to be not so amazing.
Oh, yeah. Thinking of examples like Theranos or WeWork. Huge hype, huge narratives.
Exactly. When those stories built on hype, maybe even fraud, fall apart, it really erodes trust. People get cynical. It becomes harder to know what's real achievement and what's just a really well-told story, maybe propped up by shaky foundations. The bigger the hype, the bigger the disillusionment when it collapses.
Right. The fall is very public and it makes everyone question things. And it's so important to remember, like you said earlier, real lasting success usually looks, well, different.
It really does. And this is key. Most real achievements are built over time. It's about persistence, working with a team.
Yeah, teamwork gets forgotten a lot.
Totally. And dealing with setbacks, learning from failures, maybe having some good luck or advantages along the way, that's the actual reality.
Less glamorous, maybe.
Often much less glamorous. But those are the stories that probably have more useful lessons for most people. They offer a more realistic picture of how things actually get done.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, what's the main thing you think, you listening should take away from this? What should we be more conscious of?
I think the challenge really is this. Next time you come across one of those perfect-sounding founder stories or some guaranteed formula for success that's blowing up online, just pause for a second.
Okay.
Ask yourself some critical questions, like, what might be missing from this picture? What aren't they telling me?
Good one.
Who else tried this same thing and didn't succeed? We never hear those stories, but they exist.
Right. Where are the failures?
And maybe the biggest one. Who actually benefits if I believe this story, hook, line, and sinker?
Those are really powerful questions to keep handy because I guess by questioning the shiny, perfect narratives, we can start to build a more, accurate understanding of success.
Exactly. More accurate and honestly probably more empowering in the long run. Because it acknowledges the complexity, the messiness, the teamwork, the luck, all the real factors. It's not some magic trick.
It normalizes the struggle, maybe.
It normalizes the actual process. And I just encourage you listening to keep thinking about this. Reflect on what success means to you personally. And maybe seek out and value those stories that show the bumps in the road, not just the triumphant finish line.
Great advice. Thanks for digging into this with us today. Hopefully this gave you some food for thought.
Yeah, I hope so.
Until our next exploration.